right, welcome to 420 TV, and we have returning guest Brien Foerster, and we're going to talk about elongated skulls and where they're found out all over the world.
Thank you.
And I know you're a super busy guy. You're like all over the world. You're doing all kinds of these events. So I wanted to get into this article that I saw on I guess it was Fox News is the one I saw it on first, but I went and I read it, and I was looking for specific things because you know you talk a lot about the sutures on the elongated head skulls in Peru, about
Hmm.
they just don't have them. They're not there, making it look like more like that was a genetic reason why that they grew their head that way versus head binding. And I also noticed that in this article and the paper, they overwhelmingly in like in real a lot of detail insist that it's the head binding thing. It's like a almost monotonous article there where they keep referring about head binding, like they overly want to convince you of that point. And then when I tried to look at the skulls, I couldn't find a picture of what I wanted to look at, like the features that you often talk about on your channel. I don't know if you got a chance to go over that, but I know you've studied what, probably hundreds of elongated skulls in Europe already, or at least seen them or know where they're from.
Sure.
I know, and I also noticed that these are dated at the same time as the Paracas people there. So this is a another head. If you, I'll share a screen so that they can see it there. It's kind of the thumbnail that I used here too. So, well, we'll get to that one. This one looked the closest to me like a Paracas skull, although I noticed it didn't really have big eye holes like you point out in some of the skulls down there. And I just couldn't find this picture, and so I kept clicking on, and I noticed they call them pointy skulls all the time in these articles instead of elongated heads, you know, where it would link it kind of to your work. So I
Hmm.
wanted to hear your thoughts on this, and I know it's dated from the same exact time period and near the Black Sea where the haptypes come from that you found in South America.
Right. Well, actually, yeah, the shape of that one is very similar to what the original Paracas ones looked like. You see the bulge in the forehead, which is
Yeah.
a bit of a giveaway. And as far as I could tell, I couldn't see the sagittal suture that's supposed to be here. Um, I could see the suture coming across this way, but not that one. So that's interesting. Actually, those ones date from about 500 years after the end of the Paracas. So that's kind
Oh,
of
okay. It might have
intriguing.
dates wrong.
It's in between the time frame of the original elongated skulls found in Crimea, which are contemporary with Paracas, and the introduction of the invasion of the Huns, who had elongated heads, but basically cranial deformation. But what that was originally based on, we don't know.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to get into that. And you know, whenever I hear your work and you talk about things and you're showing your presentations, it's so reminiscent of looking at the Salutrian hypothesis as far as where they get into like hap group X or whatever. You know, you can only find it over here in Europe, but it's also in some Native Americans on the East Coast, like in Canada, and the a lot of the Algonquin Indians carry that. And some people later say that that's because of colonization, but a lot of people say that there's no way that it would have had a widespread effect on people that were supposedly, you know, 100% pure, the tribe that they're from.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I wanted to ask you about how important are textiles, like you find in Paracas, because I know they had a lot of textiles there. Is there any linkage between the European type textiles found with some of these bodies and the ones in Paracas? And would that be a good identifier to a culture?
Yeah, it's possible. Some really fine, some of the finest textiles in the world are found in that part of the world, like Crimea and of course into the Middle East. The Paracas had the finest textiles, as far as I can tell, ever created in the Americas, which doesn't make sense if they were a Native American people,
Yeah.
because you know they're the first culture in that area of the coast of Peru, and why would they have such refined textiles if they're supposed to be a primitive people living in more or less in the desert coast?
Yes.
So that's obviously something that had to have come from somewhere else. So it's one of the possible tie-ins.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, and I was also surprised to find, like, why is there such a fight about the concept? Because to me, once they told me there were boats floating around in the Pacific 40,000 years ago, and that's pretty much been confirmed, into Australia and the Polynesias and different things. Why do they fight so hard this idea that later peoples that would most likely be more technological, being closer to our time period, would be sailing all over the world? Like, they act like that also with the Salutrian hypothesis, even though the oldest bodies down there in Florida were found with textiles as well. And that's like the oldest example in the world of weaving, or that they're saying anyway, with these mummies in the bogs. And they also have European features. And as far as I know, the last test on them showed European type haptypes too. But any article I come across with either subject, it seems like they discount that emphatically, that that's just impossible.
Yeah, well, the problem is that they're trying to defend their paradigm, which isn't working much anymore, because as the evidence comes to light, like of migration at times previously unheard of, and the presence of textiles and stuff like that, eventually they're going to have to give in to the fact that they don't understand the whole picture. And that's what that's what I've been trying to do for a long time, is to simply present the evidence and say, well, how do you explain this? And in general, the academics just ignore everything. But our job is to present this information to the general public and let them make up their minds, rather than having to go through some kind of academic filter.
Yeah. And you get away with that a lot easier in Peru, being able to do your own.
Oh, yeah.
Because I noticed when they talk about this this mummy that's in Las Vegas, or near Las Vegas anyway, it's so old that the Ute Indian doesn't want to let anybody do any test anymore, because they believe it's disturbing their people's grave and all that. And I respect that, but just the basic facts around it kind of point to that this mummy's 9,000 years old, or at least body. It's not really a mummy, it's just a body. But it had also textiles and stuff in it, and pretty, like, it's an out of place time period person. And they emphatically, like, and I respect the natives point, but why do you think it is that they don't want any kind of genetic testing? Is it just the same thing about protecting their paradigm and their established story of the world? Because I know a lot of people write books, not just on your side of it, but the people from Oxford and all of these universities are publishing things. And if any of this information is, corroborated or becomes accepted as fact, then their entire work is kind of worthless. I mean, people won't read their books anymore or anything.
Yeah, no, that's true. And to some degree, there are examples where Native American people are not necessarily trying to protect their heritage. Anomalous skeletons showing up that have European features long before Columbus or the Vikings showed up creates a real problem in terms of things like land claims. So,
well, I mean, I could see that, but we're talking about people so far removed to us. I wouldn't think anyone would take that seriously about, like, it shouldn't be a thing about, like, competition or cultural things, because they're so far removed people that I wouldn't really consider them close to either of us that much. I mean, it's like thousands of years ago, it wouldn't be it wouldn't seem like that would weigh in on it, but it does evidently. And I kind of wanted to get back to South America. I was looking at these pachudos, or Los Pachudos, I think you say it, these weird sculptures that they have. And they look so much like the Easter Island people, and the ones that are sitting in the side of the mountain there. And I was also looking at some of these mummies that they pull up down there that had little masks on it that have blue eyes, and they obviously have red hair, and but do you think it's possible that these are independently developed, people, so that And the reason I ask that is because they always throw kind of the PC thing on it, and you're not supposed to say that about that there's people there before they're supposed to be there. But with some of that stuff, is it possible that these people independently kind of develop that way? Because I wouldn't think so, considering the blood types and stuff like that.
No, they would have had to have migrated from a source place that had something like blue eyes or red hair. It can't spontaneously, genetically mutate to suddenly create that. But that's, again, that's something that the standard paradigm doesn't want to hear about, because it disturbs, as you said, their entire historical record. But that's, that's unfortunate, but that's the way it goes, because if you have evidence, then you have evidence.
Yeah. Because I mean, I could watch your channel, and I know that's only one source, but it wouldn't take you long to be convinced that at one time there were elongated head people all over the place that were at a different tier of society than, like, say, the normal humans. And it makes me think of, like, Zachariah Sitchin and stuff like that, where they talk about the Anunnaki creating humans, but then later mixing with them, and their whole little, the way that they did it. And they were also depicted with these weird helmets that they may have had big, giant, elongated heads too.
No, that's very true. And I was in Turkey in September. We went to a lot of ancient sites, and there were many depictions among the Hittite people of people wearing very elongated helmets of some kind. And there has to be something, some source reason for that, not just ornamentation, but it has to be based on something. Just like we find in other places where you have elongated skulls, it has to be based on something somebody saw at one time, rather than just a very strange experiment, that happens in so many different parts of the world. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So what do you think about the idea that this was just like some kind of maybe the first, and I know a lot of people want to get into the alien thing, but it seems very reasonable that, even like you say, it could be just a subspecies of human. I mean, we know there were different kinds of humans roaming around the planet. We got Neanderthal, and then Cro-Magnon, and Denisovan, and the Hobbit people, and then on and on and on. And there's probably a bunch we don't even know about.
Sure.
That they were just like the first builders, and the ones that taught the other humans where they went. And it seems like, just like any story that you talk about, the elite eventually get turned. There's usually revolutions that happen in societies, and it seems like that there was a big movement everywhere in the world to get rid of these people, not just except for maybe in the Incan case, where they seem to have bred with them for a short time.
Yeah, well, Homo sapiens sapiens is really good at conquest. And so there is data that the Neanderthal were more or less exterminated, and Denisovan probably, and the Hobbit people of Indonesia as well. And the Hobbit people and Denisovan are actually quite recent discoveries.
Yeah.
So who's to say that over the course of time we won't find 10 or more other subspecies that were exterminated or bred with by us.
I know somebody's thinking Bigfoot, but
yeah,
I've never discounted that as either, but there's no real, I've never seen any real evidence to that, the Bigfoot, except for like eyewitness stuff. But it would be cool if somebody would come up with the skeleton.
Yeah.
So look at it. So you think it's completely possible that they had maybe I don't know, I guess I'm not trying to make it sound like they were better or nothing, but they just may have been the first people that came up with complex things, because it seems like everywhere these groups go, like even in Egypt and different places, that's where all the sacred geometry happens. And I mean, I know there's other cultures that also did it, but it seems like these people were like the remnants of people that had actual kind of, I would say, futuristic knowledge. And I know you get a lot into that with the evidence of machining and high technology in all these places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Places like Egypt have the remnants of very advanced knowledge, which clearly was passed down from someone else. It wasn't independently created by the Egyptians. And most of what we know in terms of Greek culture seems to have come from what they learned from the Egyptians, like mathematics and possibly philosophy and things like that.
Yeah. I think that's pretty cool, but it seems like every so often they get rid of it, like burn it down or whatever, reset. Because I think they're doing that now on the internet. But
Yeah, they are.
I like the fact that people like you are putting out so much content that it's easy to keep up with new discoveries, and it's something that like you don't find in mainstream science. There's this Homo natali or something like that in South Africa, and it's like the first time that they've ever released information kind of really fast instead of waiting for people to write papers and do stuff where it takes 2 or 3 years to get new information. And I don't understand why they wouldn't do that type of archaeology and science in the fields of actual human being and anthropology, because you would think that would be the most important thing we would be trying to dig out of the earth.
Yeah, you'd think so, but unfortunately, things get covered up. Even with the study of the DNA of the elongated skulls, we were working with a very prominent Peruvian archaeologist who was in charge of the project. And because the results disturbed him, because they weren't 100% Native American, he has forbidden any future DNA testing of the skulls that he's in control of. So that just, that's one person shutting something down because the facts that have shown up are inconvenient to him. So it's very, stuff like that is very frustrating for me.
That's why I think it's kind of great there's so many people out there making their own content, so that you don't have to depend on the the educational industrial complex or whatever that they have going on. I was really wanting to know though about some of these mummies, the masks, and I'm talking about down in the Nazca area. Some of the masks that they find, they remind me a lot of those things found around Göbekli Tepe, the way that they look anyway. And that's supposed to be 12,000 years old. How I guess the question is how long do you think some of these other than the Siberian transit that they claim happened in 200 years all the way down to the bottom, which I have a problem with that as well, but how old do you think people were actually in North and South America, or how long do you think that was?
Oh, I think the evidence is showing a lot longer than what the conventional story is. You had the whole Clovis people whose origins are mysterious. They don't seem to have been Native American, and they basically were wiped out by the series of cataclysms around 12,000 years ago, opening the way for the people crossing the Bering Land Bridge to occupy land which was, now wide open to human habitation. Yeah. So I don't know how far back we can go, but we can go back a lot farther than what the conventional story is, that's for sure. And when you get into the traits that appear, like you were saying before, in terms of some of the artwork, like golden masks with blue eyes, if you haven't seen blue eyes before, why would you bother to depict something that you wouldn't have known about? There had to have been a source for that. So I think the migration to the Americas was very complicated from different areas over the course of a very long period of time, including they found, I think they found Aboriginal Australian DNA in parts of the Amazon of Brazil. So that means migration, and they wouldn't have crossed the Bering Land Bridge. That would have been going by sea.
Yeah, and that's pretty obvious even with these elongated skulls in this in that article with the skull there, that they're saying it's Eastern Eurasian. I mean, and that's pretty much obvious that people are having different admixtures and moving around constantly. But do you think that those literally are the same people right there that they keep finding remnants of right around Croatia and all the way over to the Black Sea there? it seems like that's the center of where everything just about comes out, right around those two big seas there. And even in Turkey, that seems more like the cradle of civilization a little bit more than it does in Mesopotamia sometimes.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And again, when I was in Turkey recently, we went to sites like Göbekli Tepe, which technically isn't really that like when you're there physically, it's impressive in terms of the scale, but in terms of workmanship, it wasn't done very well. But if they're dating it at 11,500 years old, and again, there's a lot of disinformation at the visitor center there because they say it was done by hunter-gatherers, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because that would have taken a lot of people a long time to construct that site. And obviously, it had to have been done by a civilization that was anchored in that part of the world. They had to have understood cultivation and animal husbandry and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, it had to be a cohesive unit, not a bunch of hunter-gatherers just wandering in there and constructing several 10 to 20 ton T-shaped blocks.
Yeah. Yeah, just I know what you're saying. It's not like really fine cut stone or anything, but it seems like whoever built that had contact with somebody at least that was doing that as well, because unless that's the first example of it, and maybe it just got better over time, but it seems like there's other ones that could possibly date back, especially the megalithic stuff, because how do you actually date a stone in the first place? Like, I mean, from your point of view, I know they have radiocarbon testing to test, biological material, but when you're talking about a stone, how do you date a stone?
Well, you can, but what they did, supposedly, that's the eye opener when you go there, is that a lot of the evidence they're presenting is mildly suspect. So they say they found some charcoal at the lowest level of the excavation. And from that, they were able to do radiocarbon testing, and they came up with a date of 11,500 years ago. So if that's true, they don't state how many tests they did. So did they do 3 tests or 5 tests or 10 tests? So again, the visitor center was kind of like not that great. Also, there is evidence that it was built in 2 stages, that the T-pillars, which are the big ones, the stone was from that location, that was done first, and then inferior work was done later. And that's the most interesting site I went to was called Hattusha. And there we saw lots of evidence of lost ancient high technology, like drill holes, flat surfaces,
Wow.
multi-ton blocks that fit together really tightly. Most people have never heard of that. And again, it's not until you actually go there that you see the evidence itself. We saw somewhere between 50 and 100 tube drill holes that were not done in modern times and could not have been done by a Bronze Age culture like the Hittites. So that's a site, obviously, that's very ancient, and the Hittites found it, and they made it their capital city, just like the Inca found the city of Cusco in ruins, and then they rebuilt it. And of course, the same in Egypt, where the dynastic people found the pyramids and adopted them and renamed them. So we have this recurring story that only independent researchers are exposing.
Yeah, it's almost like from the stuff that you look at in South America all the way over to that, they want to convince you that societies just decided to build something kind of nice, and then they just got lazy towards the end, and then they just didn't do it that good at the end. I hear you say rubble style, not diminishing the Incas' building and empire or nothing, but they clearly weren't building like whoever built underneath what they were building. And,
Right.
it seems like even us today would do that. I mean, we do, if you went and found a really cool site somewhere and it had a bunch of walls and everything, why wouldn't you just use it?
Yeah, exactly.
So there's really been never any writing on none of that big megalithic stuff in South America, like the 3-dimensional type round blocks and stuff like that, right?
No, there are no symbols. Symbols were added by the Inca later. But the original megalithic stuff is there's no symbolism or artwork whatsoever, just the construction.
And I think I heard you one time say that or compared at least the hand placement on these T blocks in Göbekli Tepe is like a common thing for a lot of these totem type statues where they got the hands wrapped around the stomach and everything. And when I was looking at this, one of these videos that you put out recently, I guess that's near one of the sites there, they were just the big pillar stones out there by themselves. And
Oh
they
yeah.
looked a lot like Göbekli Tepe type round drawings and stuff.
Actually, the most interesting, I think that if that was the one I put up today, that's
Yeah.
a site called Konko, which is in the middle of nowhere. But the symbolism is very similar to what you see at Tiwanaku, which is just over the mountains. So I think the builders at Konko were the ancestors of the Tiwanakan people. The symbolism is almost exactly the same.
You think how older do you think that site is than the rest of it?
Hard to tell because there's been almost no excavation there. When we went there, there was nobody there. It was very difficult it took hours to find it. And it's more or less just an open field. It's not protected by the government. You know, there's no entryway where you buy a ticket or anything like that. It's just a field outside a village with a bunch of these giant stones, most of them fallen over, and a couple of them put up. There's also a little museum there that was locked. We couldn't find the key. So yeah, I've only been there once. It's not, you know, it's not that impressive, but the connection between there and Tiwanaku was kind of intriguing.
Yeah. That it really fascinates me, and I know you said on one of the videos there you get kind of tired of traveling, but you're like always adventuring. You're like you're always going somewhere or checking something new out, which it has to be fun. And I kind of wish mainstream archaeologists and things were more like ready to do that instead of spending, you know, like half a decade on one little tooth or one little item that they found, and kind of instead of holding back everything, put it out there and let everybody research it at the same time. And there would be so much more things that people point out that they may miss or not agree with. And there'd be a lot more debate about things that were found, at least.
No, that's very true. And the good thing is that there are a lot of people who have been watching my videos, and then they develop their own channel because they go to the same places I've been to.
Yeah.
And in general, they make the same observations I have. And so the more that happens, the more it exposes the public to stuff which has been ignored for so long.
Yeah, because it's amazing the amount of stuff that I would have never learned from school or any other source like that I, you know, had to find through just having bizarre likes for strange stuff. Like I would see something strange and I'd want to get more into that. And find out where that is and why no one's talking about it. And it just seems bizarre to me that the coolest stuff out there is the stuff least talked about.
Yeah, that's very, very much the case.
And, you know, so do you think there is like a really high level, I guess, conspiracy to, you know, that there's something in the ground somewhere that's so impressive it would change human history if anybody saw it?
Well, I think that's the stuff that we've been looking at, like the site of Petra in Jordan, which is 7 miles long. Very strong evidence of ancient machining there. It couldn't have been hand tools. But again, that's not something that you see unless you go there in person, because most of the pictures are of one thing at Petra. And most people don't realize that it's much, much bigger than what they call the treasury. But when you're there in person, then you see 3 different styles of machine cutting tool marks that could not have been present during the time frame that the standard academia says it was built.
Well, I guess here the big question is where did the machines go?
That's always the big question.
Or do you,
I haven't, you know,
it's possible they just literally got melted down into weapons over time? Or, I mean, you know, if we're saying they were made out of metal anyway, because we don't know that either.
Yeah, well, it's possible that they would have been recycled by later cultures who who didn't know what, you know, couldn't work the machines, or the machines were broken or something. The natural thing to do is to recycle it and turn it into something practical for you. Like that's the example at Tiwanaku in Bolivia. There were all of these bronze clamps that used to be there that connected giant, massive blocks of stone together. But I think when the Tiwanaku people showed up 2,000 years ago, you know, the site was no longer functional that way. So they simply pried up these bronze clamps and turned them into knives and other things that were useful to them.
Do you think that's a direct link to some of that stuff in Asia and even around the Middle East that had the same kind of keystone stuff? I know other people have talked about that, but it seems like both shapes are in multiple places. And another thing I wanted to ask you is, there's a place in Japan, I guess it's behind, underneath the emperor's building or something like that. And I always wondered if there's anything that you would think that you could nail down and say, yes, for a fact, these people made this and they also made this, even though that they're far apart, or at least had knowledge of the exact technology.
Well, similar, but you get the same thing in Japan, where the imperial palace in Tokyo and also one of the major palaces in Osaka are megalithic, and the workmanship on top is inferior. So it's kind of, maybe it's an embarrassment thing that the Japanese don't want to admit that someone was there before they were. Just like the red-haired mummies found in China have been, they were on public display, now they're not on display because they don't show characteristics of a standard Chinese person. So they're inconvenient objects that you know, governments want to suppress because they're embarrassed about their own history on some level.
You'd think they'd be banking on that, like, you know.
You would think so, yeah.
I mean, because that
But
seems to me
no.
like you could get a lot more tourist stuff when you say, no, we have a way long time removed builder here that's high technology, you know, and it would even make the palace more interesting.
Yeah, but that's, you know, that's how the information is slowly leaking out through the internet. People watch videos and they see these things that don't fit in with standard history, and it makes them get on a plane to go and see it for themselves.
Yeah.
So that's that. And then they make videos or take pictures and show their friends what they saw. And that just, you know, that opens it up more and more and more. It's a grassroots thing. It's not it's not something that the government is going to open up to. And most countries are becoming more and more restrictive in terms of what you're allowed to see, except Egypt. Egypt is opening places up that have never been open to the public before, which is completely backwards, but it's great for me. So when I go to Egypt in March, I'll get to see some megalithic structures that are underground, which have never been open to the public, but now you pay a fee and you get to go see them and hopefully document them.
Yeah. And I think it's really important that they're documented. As you've seen all over the Middle East, they have different groups that are dynamiting and destroying things that are, you know, part of human history for everyone, not just like, you know, because I trip out on how I guess you would call it culty people are about their groups and heritages, instead of thinking about it more like it's everyone's heritage, because people, the admixtures and genetic drift and all these things just proves that people were just mingling all over the planet. And you can't really, I mean, we're obviously a hybrid species as well. You know, they can prove that we're part Neanderthal. I mean, there's a certain amount of their DNA in us. So it would, you know, like, I know I keep repeating this, but it would seem like it would be in everybody's benefit to line out a story of our actual history. And then you see some of the religions and stuff are trying to move just as fast to remove it, so that the debate can't be had because they've already destroyed it. And it's a good thing, like, people like you are going out and videoing it and measuring it and, you know, doing an actual investigation. So maybe when they're gone later, we can still have some remnants of something that was there.
Yeah, well, actually, there are also sites in Saudi Arabia that are almost exactly the same as Petra in Jordan, and they were getting into Saudi Arabia to film that. It used to be extremely difficult. But now all of a sudden, Saudi Arabia is opening itself up to tourism. So that's another country that, you know, has gone from banishing people, filming things that don't fit in, to all of a sudden, well, we'll open it up to tourism. And it's like, okay, that opens the flood door for people to go and expose this stuff. So anytime a door opens, you have to go through the door before it closes, you know, possibly closes again.
Yeah. Some of these stuff, yeah, it's going to be gone forever. And the only thing we have are pictures and video of them now.
That's true.
So what is in store for you for the next couple of years? I know if you go to your YouTube channel and watch the videos at the end of it, you put a pretty good schedule out for people. But as far as like, you know, specific things you guys are looking into to try to get in and look at, I know you've mentioned Egypt and other places that you're getting to go to, some new places people never seen before, or at least in the Western world.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I'm going back to Cusco in a couple of weeks with a group from Brazil. So I'll be going to Machu Picchu and showing them the megalithic stuff. So that, you know, again, the more people I get to show this to, the better, whether it's on video or in person. And then in February, I have that conference at Lachlan, Nevada, which is technically a UFO conference, but I'm going to be talking about lost ancient high technology and also the Paracas elongated skulls. Then March, we're going to Egypt. It'll be my 8th yearly trip. And a couple of sites are going to be freshly opened. One of them is supposedly a 10-story megalithic structure underneath the step pyramid at Saqqara, which has never been open to the public before.
Wow.
And then also there's a tunnel at another location that's 600 feet long, carved into the bedrock, that's never been open to the public. There's also a couple of staircases that we're going to a site called Abu Rawash that takes very special permission to get to. And just beyond there, there are 2 staircases that descend hundreds upon hundreds of stairs into the bedrock. So those are some that I'll get to see for the first time. And right after that, we're going to Israel for 5 days, because there's a megalithic wall underneath the Western Wall, or the Wailing Wall. In the tunnel, there's at least one stone there that's 550 tons. So that doesn't make sense in terms of conventional history. But that'll show you that the history of Israel is much older than what we've been taught. Yeah, then a few trips, a few more tours of Peru. I'm actually slowing my schedule down to some degree because I've been traveling so much. It seems to have been almost nonstop, and you can't keep up with or keep that up forever. It's just gets to be too much. I also don't want to oversee the site, so that's why Egypt once a year is really good. 3 major tours of Peru is really good, and Bolivia is really good. And yeah, Turkey was fascinating. The unfortunate thing about Turkey is that the sites are quite distant from one another. Like Göbekli Tepe is more or less in the middle of nowhere. So in the course of 12 days, I think we took 4 flights inside Turkey, and then we drove like hours and hours and hours. We did get to see the underground city of Derinkuyu, which goes down 20 stories underground. And that was amazing because it's all carved out of the bedrock, and how it was done. Again, the conventional story doesn't make any sense. They say that local people did these in a hurry in order to be able to develop a shelter from attack, but these are carved into bedrock, and we're talking 200 feet underground. And there's supposedly 200 of these underground cities that are connected by tunnel systems. So again, Turkey's not really trying to tell you the whole story, but if you go there, you learn a lot.
Yeah, I was really impressed with those things, and that seems to be direct evidence when you talk about some kind of, cataclysm with things like plasma hitting some of these places. That they're like old school nuclear bunkers. I mean, it doesn't make sense that you would just be hiding from people in there when they
Yeah.
drill holes and or maybe block you in. And it seems obvious that they were hiding for something a lot more traumatic, and that they were cooperating to be in there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Darren Kuyu supposedly had a population of 20,000 people living underground. That's
Yeah,
a huge population. And most of the, we were allowed to go down 10 stories underground. Supposedly it's 20 stories, but you never know. It might be bigger. They may just be telling you it's 20 stories. But most of the passageways were very narrow. Two people couldn't pass each other in a lot of it. So how would you coordinate a huge population underground like that? And massive air shafts that
yeah,
connect with the surface. So, you know, done by hand tools? No way. Age? Completely unknown. Impressive? Very.
yeah. Looks like that was some kind of like an ark, like the Noah's Ark, even around like maybe something that people were staying in at the last deluge because of not having sun and it being cold outside or something like that.
Yeah, and supposedly they had, you know, goats and cattle and maybe pigs, you know, all living with them underground. How would you keep sanitation in something like that? It's, you know,
Well,
it's,
they would have you. I would imagine they have a shaft there somewhere. I know I've seen several of the shafts in there that were wells. Yeah, but what you would have to have someone dump it out, obviously.
yeah, and these shafts,
And where is that evidence?
yeah, no, and the shafts supposedly go down 20 stories. How would you make these in a hurry? It's just, it,
Yeah, so they have
again,
been habitating there for quite some time to do that.
or they had very advanced, somebody had very advanced technology and was able to make it relatively quickly. You know, that's what it looked like. It looked like very consistent construction technique of
Yeah.
removing stone on a massive scale. And that's not something you do with a bunch of copper chisels. So again, that's what was so intriguing about Turkey. You can do some pre study of it, but it's when you get there that all the questions start popping up going, this doesn't make sense in terms of what
Yeah.
I've been told.
Yeah, and if it wasn't weather, what were they hiding from? It just or maybe they just lived there full time.
Could be.
It doesn't seem like that makes sense though, why you would want to live down in there.
Yeah, unless you were escaping from some kind of, not attack by people, but some kind of bombardment, maybe from outer, you know, the
Yeah.
Cataclysm series, that it
I,
was the only stable area to live.
I thought I read some article, I'm not positive, about one of the symbols at Göbekli Tepe that was talking about a comet that made
Yeah,
the Greenland ice sheet. You think it was probably the same event that these people built that for?
yeah, I think so. And again, that's a theory that there's one of the stelae has a depiction of a comet hitting the Earth, but maybe yes, maybe no. Again, the site was mainly the work of one German archaeologist called Schmidt, who died recently. And since then, they haven't done much. Like, he did a lot of work with his team to uncover that. And since he died, all of a sudden, all the work has slowed down. And Göbekli Tepe has become this prize jewel of the nation because it is so ancient.
Yeah.
But, you know, if they're not going to continue doing more work, supposedly Göbekli Tepe is 30 times the size of what they've uncovered, but they're not doing much
Yeah.
to do more.
Seems like the
Yeah,
same old story always. Oh, we found something, but we're going to milk it for generations.
yeah, yeah. There's a, you know, there's a tourist center there. There's a gift shop, and, you know, all the standard stuff, and lots of flags pointing to, you know, from the nearby city towards it, and that kind of thing.
'Cause
So
I've always thought that the reason that the Paracas and other people may have went to South America, I mean, this is my own opinion, is that they had some kind of, oral tradition or knowledge where they knew where old sites were and they knew where land was that they could use. I mean, because it
Well,
makes sense to me, like you said, they didn't just accidentally drop off in the biggest bay there or inlet on accident. It just none of that makes sense to me. It seems all planned and on purpose.
yeah, that's the well, that's the ongoing mystery about them, is if you can connect them genetically, and then you can figure out how they could have migrated. You know, obviously it's an ongoing process for me. There's no like eureka moment with it, but being completely ignored by academia is a bit of a pain in the neck. But that's what I'm left. You know, that's the life I've chosen to lead.
Yeah, I've also wondered. Um, they pretty much know that the Black Sea got flooded at one time when it was below sea level in dry land, so that there's habitation that was at the bottom of that in a pre-flood. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it makes me wonder if they're going to start pulling up like they're pulling up mammoth bones everywhere, you know, off the coast of places and stuff like that. That they're not going to pull up something just dredging the bottom of it that points to a civilization being there for a lot longer because they're pretty confident in their dates at when this thing flooded. So we know people lived at the bottom of it, and it completely got wiped out. So if something like that happened to those civilizations there, it would make sense that they would retreat to a better place that wasn't devastated.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the good thing is that the Russians are very curious people, so I think you're much more likely to have scientific exploration and stuff done in Russia than in some other countries, because they've had quite a history of looking at subjects in a serious way that other countries don't. Russia's really big on UFOs and the paranormal and stuff
Yeah.
like this. So now that they're discovering more and more mysterious elongated skeletons and skulls in the Crimea area and beyond, you know, that could be one country that does make major discoveries. And again, Egypt is opening up quite a lot, which is amazing to me because they were so closed off before. But now that they have a new head of the Supreme Council of Antiquities who's opening these sites up, you know, who knows what we'll find in the future that we're able to document. Like my 2 trips into the Osiris shaft, which goes 200 feet underground. You know, we had to pay $2,400 to get in there, but there were 45 of us, so it wasn't that expensive. And you know, there it is.
Yeah.
All the evidence is there.
So do you think Egyptology has kind of fallen away now that there's so much information available that contradicts their version of things?
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, there's so much developing scientific evidence of the age of the Sphinx and you know, these anomalous megalithic structures that couldn't have been done by the dynasty people, that the general public is definitely opening up to it. And I've even heard that recently some of the guides on the Giza Plateau are talking about the pre-dynastic civilization, which they would never talk about before. So again, it's a question of, it's a kind of a drip process of opening things up that is working. And now that Egypt has become a very safe country for tourists to go, the Giza Plateau is becoming very busy once again. And so the more people that go, the more that observe the anomalous things that I and others show, you know, the more the information gets passed on.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wanted to thank you for coming on. Is there any last thoughts that you wanted to share with us, you know, kind of on the topic of a broader theory about where all of this stuff comes from, I guess is a kind of generic way of
No, as time goes on, it's all becoming more and more complex, which is good. So everything that I'm looking at is, you know, I get insights from every time I go to a place, and it's just a trickle approach of getting more and more information. As I said, there are more and more people going out into the field, looking at the stuff that I and others have shown don't fit with standard history. And so, It's looking very promising. This information can't really be covered up. So, you know, it looks very promising that the true history of who we are, where we come from, and those who disappeared that we're trying to rediscover is becoming bigger and bigger every day.
It drives me nuts. I feel like, you know, I don't have enough lifetime to wait around for all this stuff. I want to go dig it up myself and find out. And I know you can't do that, but
No, can't.
yeah, because it surprises me that that archaeologists won't turn more to not like a grave robber type of stuff, but more of sharing it all and, you know, showing it as it comes out. And I can't wait for a day that it's a little more open like that. And hopefully with the work that you're doing and others are doing, it'll get like that. And then people can actually, you know, learn things more about humankind in their lifetime instead of having it milked out generationally.
Yeah, well, that's why most of the good work that's being done is being done by independent researchers, because if you get access to something, you document it, and then you present it.
You guys can go check out his site and his YouTube channel, which has mind-boggling amounts of information on it. And the reason I like your channel is because it's less like a lecture. And I know you said you're tired of traveling, but that's like my favorite part of your videos is that you're actually going there and letting us look at it with you. You know, like, and I get to notice my own things and I have my own ideas and stuff like that. And I think that's great. And you don't just have to watch his stuff. You can get on one of these tours and go with you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and here's Hidden Inca tours right here. And you've been on all kinds of stuff and you've wrote lots of books, and you can buy his books here and educate yourself with the information that he's found out. And don't forget to subscribe to his YouTube channel.